Hello, Henry. Welcome to Relentless Pressure Stories of Resilience. So, resilience is the theme of the podcast. So, let's start off with an introduction.
Great. Thanks, Giancarlo. Introduction. Oh my goodness, so much, so many years. Where do I start? I'm just going to do a broad overview.
Okay.
Historically, I would look back and I'd say I'm a very much a hedonistic and opportunistic entrepreneur, which basically means I try to do stuff that I want to do and that make me happy. Or if I see an opportunity or a problem that presents itself as an opportunity, I'll try to take advantage of that.
What are some examples of your past in entrepreneurship?
Well, the hedonism part really started. Let's go back to college. I'm sitting in a laundromat, waiting for my clothes to dry, and I got a pocket full of quarters. I don't want to study. I jonesing, if you will. I'm addicted to Pac-Man, so I can't stop thinking about, man, this place needs a video game machine, right? And so I go home, my dorm, if you will, and I call every laundromat in Tucson where I went to college. And I asked them if they had video game machines, and they all said no. And I asked a couple, would you be interested if I shared the revenue with you? And they said, sure. I don't know why I said that because I didn't have any money, but I, took my school funds and I went to an auction to buy this outdated, discarded machine. I put it in a laundromat. Eventually, it made its money back. I bought more. So that was the first sort of opportunistic business that was along with the hedonism because I wanted to play video games. I was in a laundromat. I had time. I had quarters, but I couldn't walk to the 7-Eleven or to the local, arcades that were in malls to play the video games because I had to keep an eye on my clothes, right? So that was I think the first dip of my toe into doing something that I wanted to do and made a couple of money, a couple of bucks, a lot of quarters on the side.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the sign of a good entrepreneur. If something's not available, you don't see it as a problem. You see it as something as well, this is an opportunity for me.
Yeah. And in a sense, it was a problem for me, that I wanted to solve. So as
Right.
opposed to people that go, man, somebody should really do something about this. It's like, yeah, well, I should do something about this, right?
Right.
This is a problem I have. Other people might have it as well.
Yeah, that's great. So you started off with this venture and then did you have to restore that machine? Did you have to put any money into it?
Yeah. Well, what happened was, I'd buy these machines. They were in good working order when I bought them. Like if you go to an arc, well, this is the late 70s, right? So they had arcades and laundromats in malls. And what happened was there were a couple of machines that people just didn't play. They just took up space. So they took those back at auction and said, look, we just want to get rid of them. And they were usually less than the cost of the hardware, right? It's a couple $100.
Right.
And so I'd put it in the laundromats, but occasionally, they were solid state stuff. So they weren't that bad. Occasionally they'd break down, and I had a guy who was moonlighting and doing the stuff on the side to fix them. And the only challenge really with that model was the 24-hour laundromats, because if somebody's not around in the middle of the night, somebody would just go in with a crowbar and break the cash box and, just to get a
Right.
couple
I was
bucks in
about to bring that up.
quarters.
That's probably the biggest risk, right?
Pretty much. If you had laundromats that were open sort of normal daytime hours, it wasn't that big a deal. But in the middle of the night, somebody come in, crowbar, take the couple of bucks in quarters, and that was it. Because I tried to clean it out every day, so there wasn't that big a risk. But it was the pain in the butt having to fix what they destroyed.
Right. I have a friend from grad school who was trying to do that on the side, not video games, but just traditional vending machines. It's easy to get into, it's low cost, but the maintenance was the issue. If
Yeah,
you have a full-time job and you're trying to do it on the side, it's something that you do need someone who's going to be able to repair it or
yeah.
look after it, right?
Yeah, I imagine too, you've got capital outlay to get product into vending machines. In this case, all you got to do is plug it in somewhere and it's a
Right.
it's a video game, right? So there's no outlay of expense except buying the machine, and then I would split the revenue with the proprietor of the laundromat.
Nice. Well, that's a great start. And so you're still in college. Did you finish college or
Oh yeah, yeah.
okay.
Well, I didn't learn anything, but I did graduate and I got my bachelor's, and From there, I decided, I'm going to move to Los Angeles. I'm going to produce and direct movies. That was the dream, right?
Uh,
So, of course, I sell the business for a couple of bucks that they would pay me every month so that I had money to survive in LA if nothing really happened. And I didn't get a job, or I didn't start working in movies to eventually fulfill the dream of producing and directing movies. But I did end up working on travel films. And so I traveled around, started as what's called a PA, a production assistant, and then worked my way up to, sound and assistant director. And eventually I'm producing travel films. So I'm traveling around, pretty much enjoying my 20s, really, because as a young kid with no home and no mortgage and no family, you can pretty much get on a plane and travel anywhere and enjoy the world. So it was a dream
right.
for
That's
quite a
the time
while.
to do it.
Yeah, yeah. It's also
What,
the time to start a business, because you've got less risk, right?
right.
You don't have as far to fall.
Right. You don't have a family to support usually. Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It is the right time to do it. Okay, so this travel company, well, tell us a little more about it. I think I read in the notes um that you're basically a pioneer in a certain technology.
Oh yeah, so that takes me a little bit further. So the travel company was very standard. We'd shoot with 16 millimeter film, the old, celluloid stuff, and we'd process it. And it was old school, right? This is the mid 80s, right? And so towards the end of the 80s and the early 90s, Chile, one of the countries we shot films for, Eastern Airlines, they went from a dictatorship with Pinochet to a democracy, right? And as a result, this is where the opportunity comes in. They added new television stations and a new TV network, right? So these new television stations needed programming. And so, of course, I fly down. I call up the production partner that we used when we were in Chile, and he sets up a meeting at the new television network. And I come in as this American producer, which really, I just ripped off an idea and I packaged it. And we within a couple of months, we were on the air with a new game show for the younger demographic. Again, another opportunity in Chile. There were younger um, demographics than most countries. So we packaged a show called Machos, and we start producing a game show. After about a year, somebody introduces me to this nonlinear edit stuff, and I'm thinking, this is the coolest thing ever. You can move scenes around like cutting and pasting a Word document. How cool is that? I mean, this was mind blowing at the
So
time.
wait, it was software. Is that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
okay?
was all software, digital editing system, what they call
Okay,
nonlinear editing system.
got
And
it.
if you know anything about, editing previously, you'd get a razor blade and you'd literally cut pieces of celluloid. I mean, that's how I learned. And then somebody hands me a CD-ROM and I put it in the computer and it's a virtual tour where I can, with a mouse, I can literally look up and down and all around. And I'm like, wow, for the travel industry, this is too cool, man. So I set up a company called World Travel Vision. I buy the second one-shot camera ever produced. And I set up this thing to, sell to destinations and hotels. Hey, I'll go to your hotel and your destination and I'll shoot 360-degree virtual tours. I'll give you a CD-ROM. You can take it to the trade shows and the conferences to promote your product. It was great. And of course, a couple of years in, now we're somewhere mid 90s, right? And middle to end of the 90s, some of the hotels say, so how do we put these virtual tours on this new World Wide Web thingy? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know anything about technology, right? I'm like, send them a CD-ROM. And they said, yeah, we did. And they don't know what to do with it. There are no standards, right? So I morph, well, I don't morph right away, but I figured, let me see how I can help, right? And then I realized the real value and the opportunity is not so much in the production, because any kid with a camera and a computer will soon become a competitor, right? And the distribution to the outlets is probably more valuable. So let's see how we can distribute the virtual tours. So we start distributing virtual tours to the new Expedias and Travelocities and the Orbitses at the time. And then we realized that the nice to have are virtual tours, but the need to have are photos. And ironically, photos was a problem because the old reservation systems that tell you Here's the availability and here's the rate, didn't have photos, right? So they would send those reservation systems information, and then they'd marry the photos together on a Expedia website. So they'd put the photos in a different database. And at the beginning, it was challenging for a lot of hotels because they did it individually. There were no standards. They had different sizes. They had IP issues, the intellectual property. Sometimes they'd take stuff off the web. So eventually we start a company, and I morphed from World Travel Vision, which was the 360s, and then distributing, to ICE Portal, Internet Content Exchange, which was specifically set up to collect, manage, size tag, categorize, and distribute photos to all of the major travel sites.
Great. And is that company still around today?
Oh yeah,
Ice Portal?
yeah. Well, not with me. I sold it, but yeah, the company's still doing really well. So if you go to any travel website, you see pictures of, Hiltons and Hyatts and Wyndhams and Best Westerns and stuff. Those pictures will have come from my old company.
Wow. Which company did you sell it to?
I sold it to a company in China called Shiji, which was a multi-billion. They had like 75% of the POS market, the point of sale. Like when you go to a Starbucks or something, and there's a computer that logs in all the information. That's what they managed in China, and they wanted to go internationally. And then the strategic thing was either build or buy, and it took years for us to build and integrate with all of the channels. So instead, it was a strategic buy for them.
Right. Did they reach out to you or did you reach out to them? Okay.
No, they reached out to me. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't really think I was ready to sell the company because I had a number on my mirror for a decade, and I didn't think I was at the level where I could get that number.
Right. And would you say that's the goal for every entrepreneur to sell, to have a big exit?
Listen, everything is different. It's all relative. Some people like the legacy. Some people who are, let's say, single proprietors, the business is them, so it's more challenging. Other people are very cognizant that in the technology space, things can change really quickly. So, am I going to be around in a decade? I don't know. If I can take advantage of the opportunity now, should I? Yeah, I think so. And, was it something that I thought my daughter would do? Nah. So selling was always on the back of my mind. I just didn't think I was going to do it at the time that I did it.
Right. And throughout these ventures, did you have any investors on board?
No.
No.
Yeah, the sad reality is, and actually the truth is, I tell people, if I knew how to raise money, I would have. I probably would have screwed it up, spent all the money, and bankrupted the company because I probably would not have learned some of the hard lessons that I had to learn to overcome some of the obstacles and challenges because of not knowing, really. And if I didn't know and I had money, I could make the mistakes, but eventually it all comes down to cash flow. If you're not
Right.
making a product that people are using, you're going to go out of business.
Right. I think it's a mistake for a lot of entrepreneurs out there to raise money too quickly. You
Yeah.
see a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the tech world, where they raise at these crazy valuations and they have no income at all, no revenue whatsoever. Um, and then actually a lot of times end up losing their company to the VC
Yeah.
firm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an angel investor in a lot of small companies now, and I look at the world and I'm like, how do you think that you get that valuation? I like people that are bootstrapping. I don't like people in Silicon Valley that came from another company, even if they're not the founders. They're like, I was one of the original team. Well, you may not have struggled to get there, but the reality is that a lot of people believe that money is going to solve the problems. I think that is changing though, because now valuations are coming back down to a little bit more sane reality, if you
Right.
will. But the time is like, look, I have a great concept. I haven't sold a thing. I'm worth $20 million. Really? I mean, come on. What world are we living in? Right. I think that's changing where the fundamentals of how are you going to make money, right? And
Right.
how are you going to be different? And what problem are you solving? Or what better mousetrap have you created?
Right. I mean, always stick to the fundamentals, I mean, that's what Warren Buffett does. And You know,
Yeah.
that's why he's so
Yeah.
successful, right? He's stuck to the principles, to the fundamentals. He looks for companies that have a moat, that are hard to compete against,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're right. It does seem like, or at least I hope, that people are coming back to reality, and,
Yeah.
they're going to stick to the fundamentals because there are consequences to these
Absolutely.
overvaluations.
And that's the other thing. I mean, Ice Portal had a huge moat because when you look at it, you say, listen, what a great idea. Anybody can build the technology, right? And let's say you've got this great technology that'll do everything in size tag cat. It'll do everything but pick your nose. You go to Wyndham, world's largest hotel group, and you say, listen, I've got this technology. It does everything for your photos. And they say, great, I love it. Where can you deliver? And they said, well, we're in conversation with Expedia and Booking, so let me get them first. And they go, yeah, yeah, but what about everybody else? And literally, there are hundreds tour operators and travel sites that have regional uplifts. So how are you going to get me there? And they go, oh my God, that'll take me years. And they'll say, good, call me when you get there. So it's a huge chicken and egg, right?
Right.
And it's really, really hard to find a business that you can create a moat like that, which is why historically a lot of the startups thought, let me just throw money at it and be the biggest, and then I can win that way with numbers, not so much the revenue, but with I'm the leader, right? And that doesn't always work because you really have to get a frictionless product that solves a problem.
Right. I wonder if we're experiencing that right now with AI, if it's similar to the dot-com bubble, where there is value, there is intrinsic value. It does solve problems. It will be a net positive for society. But are there companies out there that are just overvalued because they integrated AI into it?
Without a doubt. I mean, listen, early on, how many companies in the dot-com era were like flush with cash? Think of the pets.com or whatever these companies that are grocery van. I can't remember the name. Anyway, they raised a ton of money and dot-com comes around and everybody is pretty much going out of business, almost Amazon for that matter,
Right.
right? But when you look back and you're like, well, that was the bubble and it bust. But you know what? When we had the foundational stuff and the people who had true good business models and
Such
fundamentals,
as Amazon.
they did well. And I
Right.
think the same is going to happen with AI. Great product, but people got crazy and they're throwing money at everything. And now every company has AI on it. I'm like, oh, come on, let's get over it. Let's be real. They all can't make those valuations.
Right. Probably, if I were to make a guess, I would say Nvidia is kind of like Amazon in that comparison, where sure, maybe it's overvalued at the moment because of the AI hysteria, but it does have strong fundamentals.
Yeah,
And
it's
and
got
I
great fundamentals. What will happen is when people start to figure out, and it's going to happen, how to make a comparable chip and box for computing, right?
right.
At a better price and maybe faster, right? Then it starts to cut into those margins because it ain't cheap, right? And it's going to be needed. So, right now they're the monsters. They're like the only game in town, but as long as they can keep their lead, they're in a good position. If they start getting eroded with other competitors, it might be challenging.
Yeah. And earlier you mentioned that you're an angel investor. For the listener out there who's maybe looking to break into entrepreneurship, explain what an angel investor is.
Somebody who's dumb enough to give you money. No, just kidding. The truth, an angel investor is somebody who says, look, I'm going to start early. I believe in the concept. I'm going to give you a little bit of money. It can be anywhere from a few $1,000s to a few $100,000, right? And I'm a seed to get you started. Generally speaking, I involve myself with what's called LPs, a limited partnership. So somebody else who does the due diligence and says, listen, here's an idea. A bunch of small guys are going to get together and we're going to put together, $1 million or $2 million for this upstart, right? That's the general idea. There have been a few that I've done directly that I've known because I like the founders and I like the concept. So
Right.
essentially, it's a grant of money for specific equity in a company or shares in the future.
Got it. Yeah. And from your experience, is it mostly convertible notes that that
Yeah.
entrepreneurs use to raise
Some
money?
of them are convertible notes. It depends on how they structure the deal. On the LPs, it's more an equity play. Some of the others are convertible notes. I had one where I started as an equity partner and then they got another round and I got a convertible note. So it depends on how they want to structure it. And I think convertible notes have gotten a little bit more popular now that they've come a little bit down to reality, meaning, you know, pandemic wise, people had valuations that were crazy, right?
Right. And
And then
correct me if I'm wrong, but a convertible note is essentially, for example, you're the angel investor, you basically buy stock in the company at a discounted rate. And whenever there's a capital event such as like a Series A, you have the option of getting your money back plus interest or executing your right to convert it to equity. Correct?
that's exactly right.
Right.
Mostly it's converting to equity. There's very rare, unless they set that up, that converts to cash.
Right.
There is a company, a venture company that does just that, which I thought was a genius idea. They go from, let's say seed to A or A to B and say somebody's looking and they're profitable and they're not in Silicon Valley and they're SaaS and they're enterprise. I mean, he has a specific niche. And he says, listen, I'm going to loan you, bridge loan, if you will, a couple of bucks or a couple of $1 million, right? And when you go to the next round, I will cash out at the next valuation. And that is a shorter term investment with maybe a 3 to 5 times out if he does well, which protects that you have to wait till there's a liquidity event in many cases, a merger or a acquisition or some sort of IPO.
Got it. And have you used Safe at all? I've
Sure, sure,
so,
yeah.
so what is Safe? It's
Well,
similar, right, to a convertible note.
safe is just, I'm going to give you at a valuation or a maximum valuation in the future, if you will. So you say, listen, you're going to buy equity. I don't really have the valuation set, but I believe it's going to be somewhere around this. When we go and convert these dollars into equity, I won't go over this certain amount. So essentially, you're believing in the future without a definitive, here's the value today, because I really don't know.
Right. Yeah. And going back to your story, it's probably, yeah, it is a good idea that you didn't go down the financing route because it is complicated and people think it's this massive win if you do raise money. Sometimes it could be, right? Because you need that jump start. But it's responsibility. It's a lot of obligations,
Yeah.
right?
Well, let's be clear. Different businesses require different capital outlays, right?
Right.
There are some businesses that you just can't start with, bootstrapping. It requires a lot of money before you see a dollar, like a biochemical or biomed thing, right? You got to do a lot of testing and stuff for years, right? But there are other companies, software is a good idea. If you can convince people to come along for the ride and you can get some IT guys and get a couple of bucks, then you could probably earn your money back quicker without a lot of outlay of capital. You're not producing a physical product, if you will. Software is a easy to create, especially now with AI.
Right. Um, so I saw in the notes that you got your MBA, right? At
I
Nova.
did. I did.
Okay.
So when I started the business, um, this is an ongoing concern, right? I had a game show, it's beginning, middle, and end. I was producing travel films that are beginning, middle, and end, pre-production, production, post-production. This was an ongoing business, right? I need to scale this. And I don't know anything about technology and I have no idea how to run a business. So I thought, let me go back to school and get my MBA, which I did. And in the process, it helped me understand a lot of the concepts. Like when people would say things like, you're going to hire the best people. And I'm thinking, look, I can't even afford to pay myself. You want me to pay the best? And he goes, no, that's not what it meant, right? Or you need to have a vision and KPIs. And I'm like, I don't even know what a KPI is. What does that mean, right? And so those were the
What is a
basic
KPI for those who don't
key
know?
performance indicator. Sorry. It's like a way to keep measure of your health. How are we doing? How much money did we make? How much profit? How much customer service has it gone up or down? And these are performance metrics, so you know how you're doing, right? You got to have your scorecard. I'm like, I don't know what any of that shit means, right? And so the good part is when a lot of the kids that I was with go to school, They just want a degree because they think it's going to help them get a better paying job when they get out, right?
Right.
When you're there and you're running a business and you're like, oh yeah, I see where that applies, or I see where I can, oh, I see what I'm doing wrong, things like that. It was a lot more beneficial because I don't remember anything I learned in college that would have applied because I was pretty much drinking and chasing women
Right.
anyway.
And
But
also a lot of the topics you learn in undergrad are not necessarily practical, right? It's a lot of theoretical concepts that don't necessarily apply
yeah,
to the real
yeah,
world. Whereas
yeah.
in
And
an
we,
MBA, most of the professors are, they're adjunct professors who actually have done business. They have succeeded in the business world, and
yep,
they'll be able to actually teach you concepts that you can apply to your business or to the workplace, etc.
that's exactly right. I fell in love with the concept of lean management, the basically continual improvement.
Right. So you went to the MBA program. You got a lot of value out of it because you were running a business, so you were able to apply the concepts to your business.
Correct.
Um, so do you recommend it to
I,
people out there?
well,
It
listen,
depends on their situation, of course.
yeah, I recommend no matter where you are and what you're doing, I recommend learning. There's always things to learn. And now, oh my God, with YouTube and podcasts and books, and I mean, come on, if it's there's no excuse to sit there and go, I didn't have access to learn this stuff. Oh my God, it's everywhere. I mean, somebody gave me a book early on as well called Traction by Gino Wickman. And it was like, oh my God, this is my new Bible, right? And I even said to Gino, I said, we
Is that an
actually,
entrepreneurship book? Traction?
yeah, it's definitely how to get traction on your small business, which
Okay.
essentially he would lay out sort of simplistically what these things meant. Well, what's a vision? How do you do your vision? What is a culture? What does that mean? How do you get a culture, or how does that happen? Right. And so I at the time had 6 people, and I said, this is our new Bible. Read this next month. We're going to put all this stuff together. And that essentially helped create the processes, the procedures, and essentially the foundation of the business, which allowed us to scale more easily.
Got it. Okay. So, you get your MBA, you're able to scale your business. What's next? What happens? What happens after this?
Well, so, I sold the business. I was really lucky. Right time, right place, a year before COVID. I mean, come on, it's a hospitality play, right? And when I just graduated college and I was in LA, I thought I wanted to produce and direct movies, remember?
Right.
Yeah. So I bought the rights to a book. And then I gave it to another friend who's producing it. And he goes, man, this is amazing. We should do this. He was producing a movie at the time. And anyway, he ended up going off in real estate. I ended up doing game shows in Chile. And I said, look, we're going to do this one of these days. The opportunity at the time wasn't that great because there were just a handful of studios that controlled the production and distribution of movies, right? And now the world has changed with all the streamers and the ability to create content. Yes, there's a lot more competitors. Any kid with a camera and a computer now is a production company, right? But there's a lot more opportunities for good content to get distributed with the streamers, right? So I bought the rights to a book. I traveled around. I sat down. I built my tech company. So I said to my buddy, I said, Doug, when I sell the company, we're going to start to embark on this. We're going to create a series instead of a movie. I'm going to publish the book. We're going to springboard off the book to create the TV series. So the book, which is called The Reincarnation of Marie, is about a guy who finds his soulmate with one problem. She died 70 years earlier. And this is based on a true story. This woman in the late 1800s wrote a journal between 14 and 24. She died at 24. And it became an international bestseller. 70 years later, he picks up the book, he reads it, and he's like, my God, she's amazing. And then he finds himself falling in love with this dead woman, if you will. And he thinks, this is crazy. And as it happens, he finds her reincarnation. This is kind of the simplistic view of the story. The series, of course, does a much deeper dive into those concepts, and we explore the lives of Marie, the original Marie, and her area, all the people that associated with her, friends and family, and how they are intertwined with the current lives of our protagonist, who's now in the 1970s. So it's a much deeper dive into, do soulmates exist? Is there such a thing as karma, or are we, paying back the sins of our father and stuff like that?
Sounds very interesting. And transitioning to this, was there a big learning curve on the production side?
Sort of. When I was younger, I did a lot of production stuff and I produced the game shows and the travel films. So
Right.
not as much as you think, but the
But there's a
production of,
difference between a game
yeah, yeah,
show and a
huge.
TV
It's
series.
huge. It's a big deal. And now the world again is shifting because, there's a lot more opportunity, but there's also a lot of people looking for different things. It's a niche play, if you will. And so I think the world has changed, that I wouldn't come to a streamer and say, I know what the hell I'm doing. I'm the producer. That's not the case at all. I'm the executive producer because I'm bringing the materials, the IP to the table. And there are other showrunners and producers and directors that know what they're doing that can put this together, right? And they're the ones, that's the next step is, we just published the
And when
book.
you say put it together, that means getting a director, the actors, et cetera. They're basically they're the conductor of
That's
this
exactly right.
operation.
Yeah. So when I go, I'm not going to go to the studios at all. I will go to showrunners that have done similar type concepts, that are familiar with the way the game is played, if you will. And I'll say, listen, here's a concept I think you will like. And if they like it, they say, yeah, I love it. I'd like to get you involved. Once a showrunner is involved, then we attract a director and cast, right? Once you know all that, then you know a budget. Now you have a package. And then they can walk it into the studios because they've got the relationships and say, listen, because of this book, we have the series, and here's what it looks like, and here's who's directing, and here's who's attached to act, and here's our budget. So it's a lot of legwork and pre-production to get those elements together.
Right. And would you say it's very costly on the TV series side?
Costly is relative. It all depends on, I mean, Game of Thrones, $1 million or more an episode, as
Right.
opposed to another with a kid with a camera and his friends. It's, $20,
It
right?
all it
So
all depends.
it depends in large part the talent, right? If they're A-list actors, I'm going to pay a lot more for a Tom Cruise than I am going to be for a Henry Woodman, if you will, right? You could get me for cheap, right?
Right. Well, that's great. And when will it be available? When do you think it'll be ready
Yeah, if I
for the
knew
public?
that, yeah, it's sort of the school of thought would be, it's probably the better part of 8 months to a year for me to put together the elements of the Bible, which is the package, right?
Right.
Once we get a green light from a studio, let's say next summer or sometime like that, it's going to be another year with pre-production and possible production, and then post-production a couple months, so probably 2026, maybe 2027.
Okay.
And this is the truth. I would never recommend getting into this business if this is what I wanted to do to make money and
Right.
earn a living. It's just something that is a passion, and, sort of closing the chapter on the dream 40 years ago.
Got it. And this specific book, why did you choose this specific book? How did you
That's
come
good.
across it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm in LA, thinking about my life, and my sister is helping my father move. My father in the garage has a manuscript or a tribute that he wrote to a friend of his. My dad was a travel writer and a nonfiction writer. And so my sister says, well, what is this? And he says, it's a love story. Friend, I wrote it for a friend, blah, blah, blah. She goes, wow, sounds pretty interesting. Can I read it? He says, sure. She reads it. She's like, oh my God, Daddy wrote this love story. It's amazing. I'm like, yeah, yeah, whatever. She goes, no, seriously, I think it'd make a great movie. So she sends it to me, sits on my nightstand for months. Finally, I get around to reading it. I could not put it down. I was in tears. I was like, this is amazing. I called Dad. I said, look, I don't have any money, but I'll give you $1, make it legal. We'll do buy the rights. And that's essentially what happened. Then when I give it to my friend, it's because I thought, how nepotistic, man. My dad writes a book. I think it's good, right? It's my dad. And he loved it. And everybody that's read the book too has said, man, this is amazing. The concept is actually very cool because when you look at this historical person, she actually exists. And in her journal, Marie Barshkerseff is her name. In her journal, she would write, I will find you in time. She didn't find love before she died, and she knew she was dying of tuberculosis. But she kept writing about one of these days in the future, in time, I will find you. And so the guy who read it 70 years later believed she was writing to him, right? And then eventually he does find her, what he believes to be her reincarnated.
Wow. Sounds great. I can't wait till it comes out. You got to keep me
Yeah,
posted on that.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
all right, Henry, to wrap it up, I'm going to ask this question. So think about the darkest times in your life that had the most amount of pressure. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oof, that's really the darkest time was about literally days away from bankruptcy and losing my house and everything I ever had with the business. So my advice would be breathe and relax and try to appreciate the things that you have. This is the hardest thing for you to tell anybody when they're in this panic mode that the world's coming to an end. But the truth of the matter is, I had a place to live. I had people who loved me. I had my health. I ate. I slept well. I had shelter. And man, it was tough. So I would
Problems
basically,
seem bigger when you're in the storm, right? It seems insurmountable.
it seems like the end of the world.
Right.
And, it's really a matter of try to find try to find peace among it. But the reality is, I'd say, just don't stress as much as you think it is. Because listen, I will look back on several of the times I was freaking out, and a year later, and I'm like, what the hell was I freaking out about? Forgot about that. Yeah. But at the time, it was the end of the world.
Right. And the good thing is you came out of it stronger, right?
Yeah. 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 I think the real sort of clue is, your thoughts create your life, right? If you
Absolutely.
constantly think the world is coming to an end and I'm going to fail, well, you're probably going to fail, right? If you think, listen, this is an obstacle, I got to find a way to overcome it. This is just a blip or a bump in the road, then you're going to try to overcome it, and you will. And it doesn't mean keep fighting the same fight. It sometimes means pivot. I went from
Right.
producing virtual tours to distributing virtual tours to going into photos. And when you're looking for opportunity, you say yes to everything. When you find something that works, eventually you say no to everything else, and you just focus maniacally on that.
Yeah, that's definitely in the DNA of a good entrepreneur, being able to pivot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Problem arises, no problem, either solve it or just go in a different direction. Adversity is good, right?
Right.
Eventually it's going to make you stronger.
Right.
Aside from your thoughts and trying to stay positive in these moments, did you have any specific coping mechanisms like working out? Um, was
Absolutely.
that a big part of your life at the time?
Still is. I
Okay.
mean, part of the hardest thing as an entrepreneur, I think, for anybody really in life is discipline, right? I mean, there's really simple adages to say, look, here's how to live a long, healthy life: sleep well, eat well, and move, right? Work out and try not to stress. Hard as hell to do, right? Because you sit around and you're like, "Oh, I don't want to work out." Or I was a swimmer as a kid. I played water polo in college. So the discipline of swimming, and I did this during my work hours. I would take my lunch hour and I would go swim because it would clear my mind. It would give me energy, get my blood flowing, and I'd feel better in the afternoon. So constant discipline was something that helped me a lot. And that is also working out because you feel better mentally and physically. And I think the other thing that was helpful was my network. That saying that you're the average of the five people you hang out with.
Oh yeah.
And so if you have people that are inspirational and motivational that you hang out with, then you will find yourself inspiring and motivated to do more, as
Right. If you're with the
opposed to,
wrong crew, with the wrong people, they could definitely bring you down,
without a
especially
doubt.
during dark times. Yeah.
Yeah, or just listen, I punch a clock, I go home, I sit on the couch, I eat my chips, I get stoned, I drink. Okay, that's my life. I would be doing that too, right? So it's very important to sort of hang out with, well, I'll give you an example. I got a couple of groups like EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, that I became a member of. And my wife would ask me, she goes, what is it with these groups? Well, what does it do for you? And I told her, I said, you know that saying that you're the average of the five people you hang out with? She says, yeah. And I said, that's why. And of course, my wife looks at me and she goes, man, are you bringing that average down?
Oh
Trying
man,
to humble me
keeping you
out.
humble, keeping you
Yeah,
humble.
exactly, exactly.
Oh man. Well, Henry, it's been great talking to you. Hopefully we could do it again at some point. Where can people connect with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to do it again when the series comes out. Right now, I have a website called mariethestory.com, and it talks about the book, talks about the author. That's my dad. He passed away 14 years ago. And it talks about the series, Slippin'. And there's also contact information on there, as well as my LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. So if anybody wants to reach out there or read the book, I welcome it.
Great. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.